Hi, my name is Chris Polad. I'm a pediatrician at an academic institution, and I happen to be a Bible nerd, a child of divorce, and soon to be author. I created Little Pieces Club Ministries around the idea that when our hearts break, God can still make works of art from the broken pieces. I run small groups for children and teens and consult with and support parents. I also give lectures and seminars upon request. Our content centers around the science of adversity, abuse, and neglect, that is ACE science, and how biblical design patterns harmonize with it. Along the way, I discovered that Jesus' story, wrapped in the design patterns of the Good Shepherd and the Tree of Life, help us process, grieve, forgive, and reintegrate our souls after trauma. And this helps us grow strong in solitude and community, leading us to love God, self, and others, which is what the greatest commandments or greatest blessings are all about. This podcast is geared to help parents understand their children's point of view and to be a good shepherd and tree of life through the hard times. You can follow the ministry on social media in several different areas. On Instagram, we are at LPC Ministries. On Twitter, we are at Club Pieces. And on TikTok, we are at Little Pieces Club. In the YouTube video of this podcast, you will see QR codes for our Facebook group and our YouTube content. I love getting questions and comments. So now let's get into this week's episode. Our at-home format for small groups, for those of you trying to support small groups, starts with a fun and relaxing 15 to 20 minutes. Next time is followed by a snack or basically a meal time where we go over prayers in a style that is very much like examine of conscience. And then we go into the video lesson part of the application, followed by a prayer to close the video and a fun and relaxing activity again for 15 to 20 minutes. So right now we're just looking at a slide as I'm going through the presentation that reminds us to do something fun for 15 to 20 minutes. Hopefully it does not involve a screen, although if you are having good clean fun with someone else, the screen time is okay. And then just remember to set a timer so you come back. A little bit of wisdom about why we set up small groups this way is we are actually trying to demonstrate the concept of Sabbath keeping. And we'll get more and more into that as we go, but it is a time to regularly set aside work, and that can mean a variety of different things, to simply rest and delight in the gifts that God has given us. So now we're welcoming people back from their fun time, and you will need journals, prayer template, and then go ahead and continue with the next activity. So now we're going into snack and prayer time or journaling, depending upon the age group. The older kids, I tend to encourage them to keep a journal while we have activity sheets for the kids. So what you're looking at on the screen is our prayer template where we look over the week and we just ask kids to connect with the time that they have felt joyful and happy. They have had a good amount of fun, and then invited them to bring forward their negative emotions like disgust, anger, sadness, and fear. And when we go through those, we also want to ask, did God feel close or did he feel far at those particular times? And this is reflective of a very ancient process called examine of conscience. And what it does is it just helps reintegrate our souls. When we get a little far from God, we can realize that that's okay, and we just simply invite him to come back. So if those of you are leading a small group session and you are doing this, that's the basic idea. And what we always want to do is present ourselves as very warm and welcoming, no matter what kids are feeling at a given time. And they may even try to provoke anger out of us. And so we just want to be aware and ready to respond with patience and kindness. We are now moving on to Ask Me and Ask Each Other, which is our time in small group where the kids can ask any question of the small group leader about growing up in a divorced family. And this is the time that's very valuable in your ability to write down things specifically to pray for each kid, and also send me questions that I can then put out in future content that helps everyone know how to answer questions like that. This week's icebreaker question for Ask Me and Ask Each Other is, if you had no work, chores, or school, what would you like to be doing and why? Today's discussion is going to be all about Sabbath keeping. So this gets a sense of them starting to talk about the idea of work and what would you do if you had complete downtime. So looking at the title slide for this week, we see a number of images that we will link back to the idea of Sabbath. This is our Private Christian Journey Part 12 for kids, 13 for teens, and then this is the video to help people prep for the actual content of this session. We are still in the Sacred Rhythms series, so again, a very special thank you to Ruth Haley Barton. Her chapter 8 of the book Sacred Rhythms is what has inspired today's lesson. And just as a reminder of the big picture, we are looking at a tree of life drawing and focusing on the roots, where we seek, find, and accept the wisdom and love that God and Jesus have for us. And this is so that we can bring forth fruit of the Spirit and flowers on the branches of the trees. So in community, we give these things away. And we also remember that we have been talking about the rider and the elephant and our ability to choose and how it links to this concept. So we can choose to seek to know God, and then we can be willing to accept His free gifts. We can choose to ask Him for help, and then we can spend time with Him in solitude and prayer. And if we are at all afraid of spending time with God, we can remember Job and Joseph, and also Jesus' story as well. And then we can see ourselves with God's help, and then we can make big choices with God. So for this week's elephant assessment test, the question is, when I think of taking a break, on one side of the spectrum, we as a family are always on the go, or on the other side, we take 24 hours each week to rest and delight in God's world. So next we're looking at a scene where we're sawing down a tree. And so we asked some discussion questions based on this. And then next we look at a blade of the saw, and it's rusty and some of the teeth are dull. And so this harkens back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he tells the story of a man cutting down a tree with a very, very dull saw. And the man is working very, very hard and not making a lot of progress. So the idea is, what if we keep doing our work and our saw gets very dull? We get burned out, something like that. So God knew when he created us that we needed a break. And so what Stephen Covey calls as sharpen the saw, we're talking today about the idea of Sabbath. Jesus provides us an example as well that we'll get into. So we're taking a look at an adolescent girl, and the idea there is that I actually have a patient who was in a lot of pain, and she went to a pain center, and one of the things they taught her was to take a break and do something that she loved doing, like painting or something like that. So they basically taught her in a modern scientific way that taking a Sabbath was something that was going to help her deal with her pain. So so next we go on to a couple of biblical passages that help flesh out this idea of Sabbath. So the first one is Genesis 2, verses 2-3. And the idea here is that God shows us this idea of Sabbath keeping. So on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all of his work that he had done in creation. So again, we are seeing him rest and bless the day. So next we look at Exodus 20, 8-11, and we see that the Sabbath keeping commandment is actually the longest commandment that we are given. And so it goes like this: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son, your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner or stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So next in Isaiah chapter 58, verses 13 and 14, he gives us a little bit more advice about the Sabbath. If you turn your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob, your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And finally, in the New Testament, resting after doing God's work is seen. So the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So now we need to talk about the 3 basic rules for a full Sabbath. But before I do that, I want to connect this discussion to what we understand about trauma recovery and why I think the Sabbath tool is so valuable. It represents a gift that God has given to us, that we have it in our power to complete it or not. And so think about this. If you are someone who has gone through trauma, and that could be divorce, especially high conflict divorce or ongoing conflict in the family. This could also be recovering from any type of abuse or neglect. it's very often that you, at the very least, think that your emotions are not worth much. And the way to think about it biblically is that you're just dirt that has not been formed and animated by God's love and his presence. And so if you are forced every week for one day to remind yourself that God thinks that you are worthy of receiving a gift, it really messes with your mindset of being a simple dirt creature. And it helps remind you that God has formed you in his image from the ground and breathed his soul into you with his breath. So that's why I think Sabbath really kind of messes with us and really helps us heal. So the rules that we talk about are some type of regular rhythm. It could be, and for some people who do this literally, it is a full 24-hour period each week. But others believe that Jesus was talking more of a mindset of Sabbath, so that you notice when you need it, that you can take a rest. And rule number 2 is cease from work. And number 3 is delight in God's creation, both in solitude and community. And when we do small group sessions for Little Pieces Club, the whole idea is that it is a mini Sabbath from what kids are dealing with. And I think that's one of the reasons why kids report that they like it. Okay, so we've got to dig deeper into the idea of work. So that's what we're doing next in small group. And so we're looking at the slide that says, what is work? And because we are all unique, what is work for one may not be work for another. I love spending time in my yard because in my mind it's tending to a little piece of the Garden of Eden. And my wife just sees it differently. She does not like doing that type of yard work. So you have to kind of define what is work for yourself. And work is anything that dehumanizes us, that wears us out, that doesn't give us a sense of full life and purpose. And so those are the things that we have to think through. And we'll go through a couple of pictures that kind of remind us of this. So the first picture is someone doing a lot of work at night. And one additional way is if we really get into the mindset of work, it's I only matter if I produce this thing. And so next, it could be school work, next, it could be sports with a particularly heavy-handed coach that just aren't enjoyable. And then some people think that buying and selling does not need to happen on the Sabbath. But again, this is one that if it's something that you like to do, you can go out with a family and, buy new things. But remember that someone else is working. So I leave that to each of the individuals to work that part out if you are going to partake in the economy. So now a little bit more subtle is this idea of worrying. So if you're constantly anxious, constantly worrying, you need to put some thought into being able to put down the worries for just even a short period of time and do something that is just enlightening to your soul. And so ideally the Sabbath is a time without worry and deadlines, and that may need you to do a little bit of planning. So for a journal prompt for the teens or a discussion just among the kids is just ask them to list things that are work and see how they are able to commit to the idea. And of course, in small group session, this is a time where you can pause the video and do a good discussion. And then the next thing is, what is included in the Sabbath idea? in terms of what is delight. And again, we're going to walk on a visual tour through some of this, and then you can decide and help the people in small group to decide what is their Sabbath. So delights are something that you can essentially link to a gift from God that replenishes you. So we're looking at a picture of kids playing in the middle of a field and just having an amazingly good time. So they're having delight in community. Next, we're looking at a cat going with a particularly good nap. So often in discussion, it comes up that we rest the body with taking naps. And then we just see someone holding some pretty bright and happy balloons. And so what we're trying to remind people of is doing things that fill them with joy. And a brief reminder is that we do not do things that dehumanize others, and we see a quick picture of bullying. So what about media, TV, and video games? Well, that takes a little bit of thought, and so we're going to go through a couple of pictures here that illustrate. The first one is someone almost in a zombie-like situation looking at her computer. And obviously, if that activity is much like work, then don't perform it on the Sabbath. But at the same time, if you're in community with people having a really good time, and again, you're partaking in the gift that God has given us, then that's okay. And if you are into a particular sport and that is life-giving to you, that's okay. And then in community, partaking of sports and watching sports can also be an activity or that you can link to your Sabbath. So this is where an individual definition comes in. Next, we're looking at someone taking a nature walk, and of course that works very well. Next, we're looking at someone who's just laying down in a special spot, reading a book. And I found a picture of a dog reading a book, which was quite fun. But this brings in our idea of animals and connecting with animals as well. And that can be a particularly good Sabbath type activity. We have someone who's snuggling a kitten, and that is also a good Sabbath activity. And we're going through a couple of slides that remind us that this can be done in community as well, so that we're looking at two probably sisters who are hugging one another, and then back to the natural world where some otters are having a social time. And then next, we're looking at a cookie that is just absolutely full of chocolate and wonderful. And one person has said that there is no dieting on the Sabbath. So really take the day to enjoy special baking or cooking or something like that. And now for the children's small groups, we're taking a look at the activity sheet. So it's got the elephant assessment test that we took earlier, and then some space for them to write down what is work and then what is delight. And then suggests a community activity where they can go home and talk with parents. And this is something that if you're running a small group, you can set up with the parents as well in terms of planning their Sabbath. And it can start with just as little as a few hours where everybody just drops everything and does a Sabbath together. And usually once people do this and they get it right, they really never want to go back. So for the teens, a journal prompt is just to take time to write out all the things that you would do on your Sabbath, and then what you need to cease from. And then plan a family Sabbath is something that the teens can talk about as well. So talk as a family and list the things that you would do as a family. And are there any special friends who you would want to do Sabbath with? Remember, it could be a mindset or an actual 24 hours. So this week's Lectio Divina is from Matthew 11:28 and 29. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I am going to focus this week on you will find rest for your souls. But in the moment, in the Spirit, if another word is leading you, go ahead and follow that one. So now we're going to reflect on why God would be pointing us towards you will find rest for your souls. So I'll read the passage again. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Now we'll kind of decide on how we are going to respond to this. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And in the response, I just can see this idea of, oh yeah, I really need to focus today on allowing that rest to seek into my soul. So that's what we'll do. So finally, the fourth time through, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. All right, so for our closing prayer for this week and Sabbath, I will start in just a minute, but I do want to just appreciate you guys for continuing to learn about these small groups and moving forward with the process. Dear Abba, the gift of Sabbath is so profound and essential to our lives. We become sad when we realize what we are missing. Fill us with your Spirit as we consider making a full Sabbath in our lives. May we fall in love with it as your ancient people did. May it bring us closer to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks as always for spending time with us. Go forward, and I just hope that you have a blessed week and that the session that you're about to lead goes very, very well.